See Professor Tschacher, but he's here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Right.
Good.
We're all here. Okay, we can begin, I think. Sharon, let's go. So we'll just all mute ourselves. Otherwise, nobody will be able to hear anybody.
সেটা কে?
We're waiting for Sharon.
Hi, Pshita.
Hi, Sharon. We can't see.
Hi.
We can.
Hi,
Yes.
all. Shall we begin?
Yes, we shall begin.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we going directly with welcome, or is there any other announcement in the beginning? I was just. Am I to speak? Hi, Pshita.
Sorry,
Shall I
I was
start?
muted. Yeah, you are to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hi. Department of Comparative Literature and India Studies, IFLU Hyderabad, is quite happy to welcome you all to this event. And honestly, this should have been one of our prestigious flagship kind of event. If things were different, we would have had you all on campus and we would have had a wonderful time together. But this is the best we can manage in the given scenario. Let me begin the official welcome by a note of thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, who's been quite helpful and quite friendly and quite open to all our programs, and who's like a guardian to us, who takes care of most of our needs and our official requisites. Thank you very much, sir, for being there and for helping us to organize this in such a very complicated scenario. To begin with, again, like before I move on to my official duty, I would like to mention a few names who's made this possible. Of course, Dean is here. Before officially welcoming him, I also want to thank him for being with us always, being helpful for our programs and encouraging us this way. And then there are a couple of other names I need to mention, but I'll come to those names later. To begin with my duty for the day, I would like to introduce the speakers of for the day. And most of the participants would be quite familiar with this name, Professor David Shulman. And sir, again, it's quite unfortunate that we could not have you on campus, but we are quite lucky to organize this event, at least in the virtual medium. And we hope we'll be benefited out of this the same way we would have even if this was happening on campus. Let me introduce him. I know he's quite a known figure, but still, for the sake of formality, I should read out his bio note. So, Professor David Shulman is currently working is currently Rennie Lang Professor of Humanistic Studies at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and member of Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities since 1988. He's the founding member of Daesh. It's a grassroots movement working for peace and against racism and standing against the Israeli occupation of Palestine through nonviolent acts. And we know how difficult a task that he's taken along with him to be an academic and to be political at the same time. His work and research have been grounded in the history, culture, and literature of religion and life in Israel, Palestine, and South India. And his publications include translations and cultural commentaries, focusing on the literature and cultural history of the language communities located in South India. We cordially welcome you to this event, sir, and we are so fortunate to have you here, and we are like wholeheartedly welcoming you. Thank you very much for being with us today, sir, and welcome.
Thanks,
to move on, the second speaker for the day, P. Ananda Kumar, is Dean of the School of Tamil and Indian Languages in Gandhigram Rural Institute, Tamil Nadu. He's an award-winning translator between Tamil and other South Indian languages. He was awarded the prestigious Sahitya Academy Translation Award in 2008 for translating in Malayalam translating the Malayalam novel Yandram by Malayathu Ramakrishnan into Tamil. His areas of research and specialization are comparative literature, translation, and literary criticism. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us, and we welcome you to the department and to this event. And the next speaker for the day, Professor Tarsten Tschacher. I hope that's the pronunciation. Professor Tarsten Tschacher has just finished his term as junior professor for Muslim culture and society in South Asia at the Institute of Islamic Studies, Frei University, Berlin, Germany. His research focuses on the history and production of Islamic literature in the Tamil language of the Muslim Tamil societies, particularly in South India and Sri Lanka. He's written extensively on the textual traditions of Muslim literature in Tamil and contributed greatly to a comprehensive understanding of Islamic discourse in South Indian languages. His book, Race, Religion and Indian Muslim Predicament in Singapore, was published in 2018 with Routledge. And I really look forward to listening to him today. It's of a personal interest to me as well. Being someone who is interested in Muslim traditions in South India and somebody who's also working on Muslim women in India, I really look forward to your talk, sir. And thank you very much for being with us, and we welcome you wholeheartedly.
Thank you very much also for inviting me.
Now, I would like to welcome all the participants and all the teaching staff and other members of the university community who's with us today. And then I would like to personally thank a couple of names. One is Dr. Ananda of Gandhigram Rural Institute, and then Professor Shulman himself, and also Professor Sujatna Banerjee from Symbiosis, who have helped to coordinate the event and to contact the speakers. Thank you very much, these three names, specifically for making this possible. Now, I would like to welcome our dear Dean to this event, who's also chairing the session. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us and your with us. Welcome to this event. And a few department, Professor Chanda, others in the department, my own colleagues, and then the DS. I also would like to welcome the students much for taking the initiative, for being part of the whole thing, and I hope.
Professor T. Sampson, Dean, School of Literary Studies, for his continued help and support, and for agreeing to preside over this session. Sir, maybe request you to say a few words. Sir, I think you're muted. You'll have to unmute.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Professor Ikshita Chanda, Professor Shulman, Professor Ananda Kumar, Dr. Tschacher, my colleagues at EFL University, and my research friends, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very, very pleasant duty for me to chair a session with such eminent personalities talking about my own culture. I come from Tamil Nadu, so I speak Tamil. I have learned formally some Tamil, but it's also a difficult situation for me because I feel a little ashamed that, I haven't done much towards my own culture. That's my primary duty as a person involved in literary studies. You got to do something to your own cultural tradition. But apart from learning something about it during my, school and college days, I haven't gone on to make any contribution. So I must thank the two gentlemen for, kind of enlightening us on the cultural traditions. So I also feel that the theme of the seminar, Porul, is a very, very the appropriate theme, title, if you choose to call it that. Porul, I'm sure all of you know, resonates with productive ambivalence. Porul actually has two meanings. I'm sure all of you are aware. One is the material wealth, Porul. The other, of course, is the spiritual dimension, the meaning of things. God is known as Paramporul, somebody who is the transcendental signified. So both the terms, coalesce, and both the meanings rather coalesce in one term called Porul. And this, for me, is the interesting point about it. The ancient Tamil poetry, the little I know, is suffused with this productive ambivalence. It is both an endorsement of the practical and the spiritual, the material world, and the pure realm of ideas. That is the the kind of drift I get from here. The little I know about the Tamil literature and culture. Tirukkural is an interesting case in point. I'm sure you've heard about it. This work, in fact, it has three major divisions: Aram, Porul, and Inbam. And Porul is sandwiched between Aram and Inbam. One is Aram is virtue, Inbam is love, and Porul, of course, is the material, the practical, etc., etc. Of course, scholars like Professor Shulman would say that each section is aimed at a particular kind of audience. The one on virtue, the Aram section is for ascetics. The Inbam is for the young people who are in love, who are getting married, who are kind of in the act of courtship and so on. And of course, Porul is for everybody else, like middle-aged folk like us. But there is also this productive tension and productive ambivalence in the very sectioning of these three, the book, the collection of poems. I think each section reinforces the ideas in the other. The section on virtue has a bearing on the section on love. The section on love has a bearing on the section of the section that he called Porul. So there is an interlink among the three things. Again, coming to the love poems of the Sangam period, the Agam part of it, I'm sure Professor Shulman would talk about it a great deal, discuss it in a detailed manner a little while from now. They also, in my view, manifest this ambivalence. The Janus-faced stance perhaps explains the popularity of the Tinai or the code for well over 300 years. I always wondered, how is it that poet after poet was writing in the same format, using the same scheme for over 300 years? Can we imagine it in today's context? But to me, I don't know, you must correct me, the almost one-to-one correspondence between human relationship and moods on the one hand, and the landscape with all the attendant features, the season, the flora, and the fauna, could perhaps be explained by reminding one of the coexistence of the physical and the spiritual in the collective consciousness of the time. That, to me, perhaps is the reason why for over 300 years, the same sort of code, survived, and poet after poet wrote within this particular set of norms and stipulations. The quotes to me suggest the following, and I would like a learned response from my colleagues. The first one for me is a conception of human nature on the horizon of human experience as a pre-given phenomenon, and also a view of poetry as a vehicle of this idea of the human. So a fixed sort of a set of ideas about human nature comparable to Plato's ideas, perhaps in some sense. Secondly, a pre-modern understanding of the relation between the human and the biosphere, in which consciousness and its other, the world and the self, interpenetrate each other. Today, the best we can think of about man, woman, and their world, the earth is a metabolic relation, but these ancients went far beyond it and conceived these two categories as interpenetrating each other. Third, I also see this kind of code, the Thinai, as a strategy to provide easy access to a well-established scheme or formula, much like the potboiler of today, aimed at initiating the lay reader into the complex world of love with all its physical and spiritual resonances in order to fine-tune this lay reader's sensibility. So it's in a sense a trick by which the ordinary reader was dragged and tempted into the world of poetry. And finally, it's a unique synthesis of image, music, and text, the oral, the visual, and the verbal, a synthesis regarded as the hallmark of artistic achievement. If you see the images that are evoked, the verbal devices, and also the music, most of these were sung in tune, as it were. So I see it as an achievement of these three, the synthesis of these three. So these four together suggest to me the reason why the code survived for so long. Anyone familiar with the Agathinais of ancient Tamil literature will grant that this is a valid set of inferences. The productive ambivalence of ancient Tamil poetry and poetics towards the spiritual and the practical realms seems to me a reasonable assumption. So, Porul, wherein you have captured this productive ambivalence towards the spiritual and the material, is the right kind of theme, the right way to go. The next point, the next part of this today's work relates to the openness of ancient Tamil poetry and culture to the other cultures of the world. There's this famous saying, some of you who are familiar with Sangam literature would understand, would know this, Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir. Everybody is my relative and every place is my place, my space. This suggests the shaping influence of world literatures that Tamil culture was exposed to. So we're going to hear about the Islamic tradition, later on the Buddhist tradition. So Tamil literature was characterized by this openness to the cultures and religious traditions of the world. So it's appropriate that the workshop has included this as part of its work, as it were. The Tamil world is familiar with, only Joseph Beske, somebody who taught us to dot our consonants, who taught us how to lengthen our vowel and orthographically represent our vowels. And then he translated quite a lot. His name is quite familiar among all the Tamil-speaking people, at least those who go to school and college, etc., those who are educated. But the influence of the Buddhist tradition, to me also, personally speaking, or to the others, is something that is new. So we look forward to listening to Professor Anand about this influence, and also about the Islamic tradition, which is much neglected in the discussions, the popular debates on television. Whenever Tamil scholars assemble and talk about it, very little is said about the Islamic tradition and how it kind of influenced the way poetry was written and the Tamil poetics, etc. So I'm sure today's session will inspire us to look at the cultural traditions of the South and help us understand the civilizational identity of the Dravidian in contradistinction to the other cultures and traditions of the subcontinent. So I thank you for this wonderful opportunity and look forward to a wonderful session.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, sir. Before we introduce our speakers, I'd like to make a few announcements. We request all the participants of this workshop to keep their mics on mute at all times. This workshop will be recorded. The question and answer session will begin only at the end of all the 3 sessions today. During the question and answer session, you can either unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can put them in the chat box. The link to the participation certificates will be given at the end of the second day, that is tomorrow. Over to you now, Swati.
Hello, everyone. We have kept the bio notes of our speakers very brief because each one would fill a session by itself. They are very visible on all sites from academia.edu to Wikipedia, and we refrain from choosing amongst their numerous publications. For example, Professor Shulman has been publishing internationally acclaimed works since 1980, and Professor Ananda Kumar since 1987. I think it is safe to say that they have been doing so even before most of the participants were born. Their complete list of publications can be found online. I will now move on to introduce our first speaker of the day, Dr. David D. Shulman. Dr. David D. Shulman is currently Rennie Lang Professor of Humanistic Studies at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and a member of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities since 1988. He's the founding member of Tayash, a grassroots movement working for peace and against racism and standing against the Israeli occupation of Palestine through nonviolent acts. His work and research have been grounded in the history, culture, and literature of religion and life in Israel, Palestine, and South India. And his publications include translations and cultural commentaries focusing on the literature and cultural history of the language communities located in South India. Over to you, Dr. Shulman.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Okay, yeah. So thank you, Swati, and thank you, Ipshita. Thank you, Professor Samson. I'm very happy to be here today. I have a slight request, if I may. I wonder if the participants could put on their video, because I'm looking at a huge collection of black boxes, and it'd be kind of nice to see faces, yeah, so that I don't feel like I'm talking into a kind of black hole, you know? That's a lot better. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I want to say it's an honor to be with you. I've been planning a visit for actually some years to your institution. I'm an ex-Hyderabadi myself. I have a tremendous affection and connection to Hyderabad, where I lived for some time in the late 90s. So in short, it's really lovely to be here. Since I only have about 20 minutes, I'm going to launch right into what I have to say. Ipshita says that's right? 20 minutes is what I've got? Yeah, okay. So listen, this is what I'm going to do. It's a rather large topic for 20 minutes. I've been asked to speak about the Tamil poetic system and its links to or connections with, interconnections with other poetic systems in South Asia. And I'm happy to do that. You know, the Tamil case is an unusual case. Professor Samson himself said it. It's unusual in the sense that we find in the earliest period of Tamil a very well-articulated, formalized, ramified, I would say grammaticalized system of poetics. It's not the only such case in the world, but it's probably the only such case in India, where there is a poetic system developed, which was shared by several hundred poets over a period of many years, actually even beyond the 300 years that Professor Samson mentioned, because people were writing Sangam style poems throughout medieval Tamil history and even into the early modern period. I'll be talking about that tomorrow, but just to be sure that everybody knows what I'm referring to. So let me just say this was a system that was based on a particular kind of suggestive technique. The Tamil country was divided into 5 prototypical regions, Tinai, each region associated with a particular phase in the love relationship between 2 people. There's also on the the other side, the Purim side of war and heroic struggle, again, we have the same 5 Tinai, but they're correlated to different phases in conflict. And this comes with a whole set of signifiers that suggest the phase of the love relationship, which is specific to whatever Tinai is being mentioned in a particular poem. And there's a technique which is called Ullurai Uvamam, which is what explains this tremendous sense of a kind of organic connection between the internal states and between some kind of external elements of the landscape or the natural world. So I'll be talking about that at some length tomorrow. I'm not going to say more about it here. But I do want to say that this is an unusual case in the sense that we find this at the very beginning of Tamil literary history, and it survives for a long time. But before I say anything else, I'm going to say a few things about Sanskrit and Sanskrit poetics in relation to Tamil, and then if there's time, I want to say a few things about Jaina Tamil. But before I do that, I want to just make a general remark, which I think is rather important. We should keep it in mind. All of us should bear it in mind over the next session and also tomorrow. I think it's necessary for us to extricate Tamil, both Tamil language and Tamil literary culture, and maybe Tamil civilization generally, from the kind of splendid isolation that it seems to claim for itself and is often attributed to it, especially by politicians. It's been about 150 years. It's as if there was an idea that Tamil, what we are calling Tamil language, Tamil literary culture, it's as if there was an idea that this was some kind of pristine, pure, primordial culture, which was later contaminated by contact with all kinds of pernicious influences coming from Prakrit or Sanskrit, or later from all kinds of other languages like Persian and Arabic and Latin and Italian and so on into the modern period. But I just want to say for the record, there never was such a pristine Tamil culture. It's quite wrong to imagine it in those terms. We have Sanskrit and Prakrit embedded within Tamil from the very, very beginning in the Brahmi inscriptions and then also in the Sangam poems. I won't go into the historical material, but you should know that it's wrong to think of Tamil as being some kind of isolated unit. It was never like that. Quite the contrary. Tamil in some ways is one of the most interpenetrated of the South Indian literary cultures. And that also applies to the linguistic side of things. We'll be talking about literature, but it seems to me that we often have we talk as if the Tamil language existed in some kind of normative, middle range, relatively familiar and intelligible form that was shared by everybody, and that people who spoke different kinds of Tamil or wrote in different kinds of Tamil literature were actually deviating in some sense from this putative norm. But once again, I want to say that the idea of some kind of standardized, formalized Tamil, I don't think it ever existed in the past. It's questionable even if it exists today, even with television and the films and the social media and so on. Perhaps today it's coming into being, something like that. But Tamil, like all of the South Indian languages, it's not just a kind of single block with it has a formal register, which was, you could say, descriptively embedded in a grammar, the ancient grammar called Tolkapian. But actually the Tolkapian grammar was above all a descriptive grammar, not a prescriptive grammar in its origin. It catalogs all kinds of things in Tamil grammar, but it also makes room for all kinds of variation, including dialectical variation. And Tamil, like all the South Indian languages, really it's a continuum of dialects. So it's not as if we had Tamil, and then there is, let's say, Jaina Tamil, which is something quite different. There's a specificity about Jaina Tamil. There's a specificity about the Muslim Tamil, as we'll hear later today, and about Christian Tamil, and so on. We could go on like that. But you have to imagine Tamil as an extremely wide range of dialectical, community-based, geographical-based dialects. You have to get away from the sense of a kind of prescriptive normativity. It's an illusion. Okay, let me say something now about the relation of the Tamil poetics system and the Sanskrit poetics. So here, I'm going to just make three rather simple points. Okay, we'll begin with the fact that what we could call the Tamil poetic system focused above all on the analysis of poetic figures, alankaras, ani in Tamil. That system found its way into the Tamil poetic discourse relatively early on, not in the Sangam period. In the Sangam period, actually, we don't see traces, or very few traces of the traditional alankaras that we know. I'll illustrate in just a second. But by the middle of the first millennium AD, that is by the 6th or 7th century, we begin to see the same kind of alankaras that we find in Sanskrit. These were alankaras whose logic was formalized by the poet and poetician Dandin, who lived at the end of the 8th century and into the, around the year 700. He was at the Pallava court. He was a Tamilian, actually, bear in mind. But Dandin's grammar, the Kavya Dausha, which is really one of the fundamental works of Sanskrit poetics, gives you a list of alankaras, but it's not just a list, it's an attempt to tease out the analytical logic that motivates the different figures. So I want to stop talking in a kind of abstract way. Let me give you an example. Most of you will know this, but still, just to be sure that we're on the same footing. So if I say, I'm talking now about the Sanskrit system of alankaras as it appears in the Kavya Dausha and as it came into Tamil. If I say to my wife, as I sometimes do, your face is just like the moon, or I might say your face is as beautiful as the moon. That's an upama, that's a simile. I'm likening one thing to another thing. So I have the upamana, the standard of comparison, and I have the upameya, the thing that I'm comparing, okay? If I say to her, your face is the moon, what is that moon that I see on your neck? Something like that. That's a rupaka, a kind of metaphorical identification. If I say to her, you know, poets talk about faces and moons, but the truth is that your face is infinitely more beautiful than the moon. That's an alankara which is called vyatireka, distinction. That means that the upameya, the element that is being compared, exceeds or surpasses by far the upamana, the standard of comparison, right? All of these figures and many others like that, based on a notion of similarity and comparison, all these figures are given to us by Dandin in his Kavya Dausha. They existed in Tamil before that. It's rather important to know that this kind of figuration, I'm talking about figuration or ornamentation, this kind of figuration made its way into Tamil by all kinds of subterranean channels. We're not really very clear how it happened, but it's all over the Tamil poets of the second half of the first millennium AD. It sometimes takes more inventive forms. You know, the Sanskrit poeticians realized that to say to a beautiful woman, well, actually every woman has a face like the moon by definition. To say to a woman, your face is like the moon doesn't take you very far. It doesn't really have much of a poetic effect. But let's say there are two lovers and they're walking in a park in Hyderabad, I don't know, by the tank bund at night, and it's in the new moon time, before the new moon has even arisen, so it's quite dark. And the man says to the woman, he says, strange how dark it is tonight. It must be because the moon was afraid to rise because it's a person, he was afraid that he'd be compared with your face to his disadvantage, right? So that's a figure which is called utpreksha, or actually it's a combination of utpreksha, a kind of visionary way of seeing. Usually it involves attributing some kind of intentionality to something that doesn't usually have intentionality, like the moon. So it's an utpreksha based on that same notion of vyatireka that I mentioned before. That is to say, the object of the comparison, what is being compared, surpasses the subject of the comparison. If you say it like that, then there's at least a possibility, especially if this happens on stage, let's say in a play, there's at least a possibility that you may feel something, some kind of poetic effect. Okay? If we were to use the language of the Kashmiri poeticians, we would say maybe that in a case like that, I say the moon is afraid to rise tonight because of the beauty of your face, you might get a little taste of what they call rasa, which is a word that all of you know. A rasa experience, a kind of universalized, abstracted emotion. But let me go back for a second to the Kavya Darsha and to the formalization of these figures by Dandin roughly in the year 700. That kind of figuration became assimilated to Tamil poetic technique, so that we get a blending of the old Sangam period, native Tamilian notion of the tinais, the ahatinais, ulurayuvam, the poetic techniques of the early period of Tamil. They begin to blend with this alankara-based poetics and the kinds of cognitive and sometimes affective effects that one can achieve by that combination. Okay, I hope so far that's clear. Now, I want to say, interestingly, that what we do not find in Tamil in a very prominent way is the Kashmiri theory of poetic or aesthetic experience based on rasa. It's not absent from Tamil. It exists in the Tolkappiyam. In the third book of the Tolkappiyam, the Porul Adhikaram, we have a chapter called the Me Parti. Me Parda is correlated, basically it's correlated to something called the Stai Bhava, the base emotions of the Kashmiri school. And there's also a notion of rasa, which in Tamil is called suvai. And there's a question of suggestiveness, suggestibility, suggestion, iraichi. And this is set forth in the Porul Adhikaram, not at very great length. And the truth is we hardly see any impact of Kashmiri poetic theory, including its metaphysical suggestiveness, which is important to the theory. We hardly see it in Tamil poetry at any stage, right up through the medieval period and into the modern stage. What we see is the assimilation of figuration along the lines that I was mentioning earlier. Having said that, there is something to be said about the fact that by the late medieval and early modern period, we find poets who are choosing to write in Sanskrit or in Tamil or in both languages. And each time they make a choice like that, that choice is probably motivated. There is a reason for people writing in Sanskrit. If I have time, let's see, how am I doing? I have another 10 minutes or so. Is that right, Ipshita? I have 10 minutes to go? Okay, yeah, okay. So I'll come back to that in a minute because I'd like to say a word or two about the early modern period, which is the period that I'm most interested in. Now, I'd like to say something about Jaina Tamil. You know, when we're talking about another poetic system, which is in some kind of symbiotic relationship with the other poetic systems of Tamil, we're talking about something like that. Really what we're looking for is a kind of sensibility. It's not so much a matter of poetic technique per se. It's not so much a matter of the formal logic of figuration or of suggestion or any of the things that I've mentioned until now. What I think we see primarily, and the thing that is most difficult to define, is a kind of sensibility that comes by activating a poetic system within Tamil, a system that may have its own integrity. So let me give you one example because it's a lovely example and it's one which often goes relatively unnoticed. We have a rather large literature in Tamil, medieval Tamil, in the end of the first millennium and the beginning, so let's say during the Chola period. It was composed by Jains. And they spoke a particular kind of Jaina Tamil. We know this for sure because when in the year 1875, the great Tamil scholar Uve Saminathar, who is the man who recovered Sangam poetry, not single-handedly, because the Sangam poems had been largely forgotten. When he began his adventurous exploration of pre-medieval Tamil, he began with a Jaina book called the Sivika Sintamani. Actually, it's a magnificent book. I wish you could read it. Those of you who know Tamil should read it in Tamil. It's one of the most beautiful of all Tamil books. Those of you who can't read it in Tamil should learn Tamil so you can read it in Tamil. The Sivika Sintamani is a Jain book, and it's filled with all kinds of Jain expressions, including archaic Tamil morphology that existed in the Jain dialect, and all kinds of lexical expressions. It's a dialectical form of Tamil. And Saminathar, who was reading from a manuscript, several manuscripts, he couldn't understand everything. And that's because although the book was written in Tamil and he was a fantastic scholar of Tamil, there were things that he didn't know because they belonged to Jain Tamil. He went and lived with the Jain community near Kumbakonam for some months in order to learn to speak that kind of Tamil. So you can see from that story that Jaina Tamil was something a little different. It was a dialect of its own with an integrity of its own, and also a literary aesthetic of its own. I'll give you an example. Actually, before the example, let me first say the following thing, because there's something that Tamil owes above all to the Jains, and that is the notion of a large-scale narrative poem, a kavya, but it's a kavya based on some kind of katha, on what we call the katha stratum. I'll tell you what I mean by that. We have kavya earlier in Tamil. In the middle of the first millennium, in the 5th or 6th century, we have the great work of the Silappadigaram, which defines itself as a kavyam, a kind of kavya. But that's a different kavya than what the Jain poets were writing. And we have several of the great Jain kavyanga. That is to say, we have the Sivika Sintamani of Tirutakadeva, which I just mentioned. And we have a book called the Sulamani, which I'm afraid hardly anybody reads anymore, but it's a magnificent Tamil book, a beautiful book by a poet called Tola Mori Deva. And like that, I could go on. I don't want to bore you with names. These are poems that are written not in the versified form of the Silappadigaram or the Mani Mehalai, which you'll be hearing about later today, I'm sure. They're written in a new verse form, which is called Viruttam. Viruttam are usually 4-line stanzas. They can stand alone in a sense, but in a big narrative poem like the Sivika Sintamani, what you get is something on the order of 3,000 Viruttam poems that are meant to be read together as a sequence, not necessarily in a linear sequence, that's another question, but in some kind of sequence. Those Viruttam verses, first of all, they're very beautiful. I'm going to read you one in just a moment, so that in case those of you who don't know Tamil and have not heard of Viruttam, you'll hear what it sounds like. These Viruttam verses are an astonishingly versatile poetic form. And they lend themselves to, how shall I say it, to sustained narrative description, including sustained passages dealing with all kinds of cognitive and emotional elements, like in the ancient Tamil poems. And we also find remnants of the old Tamil grammar in the Jain poets as well. You know what, let me give you an example just so you know what it's like. The history of the story of the Sivika Sintamani, it's about a hero who's called Sivakan. This is a story that is known from Prakrit and Sanskrit sources. Important to bear in mind that the poet didn't invent it. He took it from, he knew it in Sanskrit or in Prakrit, probably in Prakrit, and he wrote a Tamil version of it. I'll tell you how and why he did it in just a second, but first let me give you a taste of it so you know what it sounds like. Sivakan, the hero, despite the fact that this is a Jain work, and the Jains, as many of you know, they have a kind of ascetic philosophy of renouncing the world. And the slightly ambivalent maybe even hostile notion, I'm talking about the Jain monks in particular, to human sexuality and to sensual experience. Despite all of that, this book, the Sivaka Sintamani, is called in Tamil Mananul. It's the book of marriages, because Sivakan literally goes from one beautiful woman to the next, and he marries all of them in the course of these 3,000 verses, until finally at the very end, when he's exhausted the entire domain of erotic sexual life, he marries for the last time, and this time he marries the Mukti Marandai, that is the goddess who is Mukti, release, ascetic release, okay? But in the course of these 3,000 some verses, there are incredibly beautiful love poems, because this is a book about falling in love and getting married. So there, I'm going to read you just from one moment where there's a music contest. The hero Sivakan, he's a great musician. And there's the young lady in question whose story I can't tell you because there's no time, but she's agreed to marry whoever can defeat her in a musical contest. And she's a very great musician on the veena, you know. So she plays and she sings a number of love verses. They're somewhat reminiscent of the Sangam style of love poems. And then Sivakan plays. Sivakan is an outstanding musician, and there's no doubt right from the first moment that he's going to defeat her in the music contest and marry her. So let me read you one of the Sivakan verses, and then the conclusion of that, the final verse in which the young lady in question, her name is Kandarva Tattai, acknowledges her defeat. So he is singing. He says, listen to the poem. I'm sorry I don't have it on the screen for you. He says, "Pallid with love are my forehead, brilliant as the crescent moon, my eyes limned with mascara that are always ready to do battle, and my all too heavy breasts. On the high mountain, the waterfall that gleams like a sword, the waterfall that gleams like a sword flashes like lightning. Tell me now, my friend with eyes like spears smeared with poison, how can he, the lover, how can he fail to see?" If we had time, there's rather a lot I would want to tell you about this verse, but you might notice that there's a lot of kind of military imagery. The eyes are like spears, and the waterfall itself is like a sword, and that's not for nothing. That's because the love experience has those elements woven into it. Let me recite the poem to you in Tamil, just so you can hear what a Tamil Viruttam verse is like. Irayar tirunudalum Pera Murunkanum Porayar Vanamulayum Pum Pasalai Murga Nirai Val Ilangaruvi Nilvarai Men Mirum Karai Venel Un Kaninai Kanar Kol Kelva. And the thing about a Viruttam verse, which also goes with this new literary form, which the Jains gave to the Tamils, is that the recitation mode usually allows the singer, actually it's recommended that the singer repeat phrases so that everybody hears them more than once. And that repetition has its own poetic qualities. So I won't say more about these kavya works that are based on katha stories, but you can see that Jaina Tamil was something that actually gave the Tamil tradition something really crucial. Not that long after the Sivaka Sintamani that I was reading to you, we have Kamban, the great poet Kamban, writing the Kambaramayana, which follows the same kind of prototype. I want to read you the last verse from this passage that I was in, because after the musical contest, the lady who's been defeated, she's not entirely unhappy. She here's what she does, and the poet tells us. He says, her anklets were ringing softly, and her belt was shimmering like lightning as she walked, just a little hesitant, but with a grace that would put even a graceful goose to shame. Unlike English, Tamil thinks that the goose is a remarkably graceful animal when it walks. Then she tossed the garland on her lord as if to say to all of us who live in this world, that being selfless was its own reward. She's selfless because she's given up all of her egoistic investment in her own musical ability. And she's very actually happy to have been defeated by this man. Being selfless is its own reward. And I wanted you to hear that verse because you can see something of that sensibility that I was talking about. That's a Jaina verse. It's said in the context of erotic love, of a music context, of poetic beauty. But the idea that there's some kind of selflessness, which is its own reward, is there in the sensibility of that Jaina poem. Okay, I should also say just one last thing about the Jaina Tamil, which is the Jains, for some period of time, I think perhaps 2 centuries or so, they had a kind of almost a monopoly on the Tamil erudite world. They were very good in metrics, in lexicography, in all kinds of erudite sciences, grammar. I don't want to go into it now, but you can see that the Jains were not, how should I put it? They were not some kind of extraneous intrusion into the Tamil world, but quite the contrary. They were taken into the Tamil world and made it their own and gave Tamil something that perhaps only they could have given it. That form that we were talking about, the Viruttam-based kavya, became the dominant narrative form in Tamil for the next 1,000 years or so. So I'm going to have to stop. If there were time, perhaps in the question and answer time, we might speak a little bit about the early modern period, where there's something to say about the relations between Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam, also Sanskrit and Persian. If we have time, I'd like to give you some image of this very multilingual intertextual universe of the early modern period, the 16th and 17th centuries. But I think for now, I should probably stop right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shulman. Next up, we have Dr. P. Ananda Kumar, Dean of the School of Tamil and Indian Languages in Gandhigram Rural Institute, Tamil Nadu. Over to you, Dr. Kumar.
Good evening to everybody. Professor Chanda, the chairperson of the session, Professor Samson, the international renowned scholar, Professor David Shulman, Professor Tarsten, and other learned peoples. Good evening, everybody. My topic is the influence of Buddhist philosophy in literature. In the earlier talk, Dr. Shulman very much explained about the influence of Jainist philosophy and Jainist literature in Tamil, Jaina Tamil. I will speak on both Buddha Tamil. A scholar called Sini Venkadaswamy, who wrote many books regarding the influence of Buddhist philosophy in Tamil and Jainist philosophy in Tamil. He wrote 2 books, Samanamum Tamilum, Jains and Tamil, and another book, Bautamum Tamilum, Buddhism and Tamil. He traced the philosophy and other religious aspects in Tamil in his book. The book was, I think the book was written in the 1960s. Okay. After that, so many research done about the influence of Buddhist philosophy in Tamil literature. I have worked in 2 topics regarding the Buddhist philosophy in Manimegalai. You know the 5 Mahakavyas of Tamil, Silappadigaram, Manimegalai, Valayapadi, Kundalakesi, and Sivaka Sindhamani, Pancha Mahakavyas. The first epic is Silappadigaram, then Manimegalai. Some scholars called both the Silappadigaram, Manimegalai are twin epics because of the continuation of story and same characters. The Silappadigaram and Manimegalai are the first two Tamil epics. They propagate the Vedic religion, philosophy. Some scholars assess that the Ilango Adigal, the author of Silappadigaram, may belongs to Jaina. But about the Manimegalai, the epic was written by Sitali Chatnar, who is a Buddhist philosopher. So the Manimegalai, I talk about the Manimegalai. Some other traces I could not talk because within this shortest period, we can trace the Buddhist philosophy traces in Sangam literature, particularly in Madurai Kanji. We have there is a mention about the Buddha Vikara and the Chinda Devi is a god of Saraswati. Kalaimagal, we can say in Tamil Kalaimagal. There is a temple annexed to that particular Buddhapalli, Chinda Devi temple, are also mentioned in the Madurai Kanji. Further, the Amaravati, there is a epigraph in Amaravati pillar in Andhra. That particular epigraph, there is a mention of Tamil Buddhist people, particularly Tamilan Kannan, then his brother Ilangannan, then his sister Nagai. The three Tamil Buddhists are mentioned. They are construct that particular pillar. They are sponsoring that pillar. So the before the BC 2 to Sangam period, there is a mention about the Buddhist followers, Buddhist religious people are lived in Tamil Nadu, and they are contribute very much about the religion and philosophy also. The Manimegalai epic is a epic, but even though it is a religion, it is a religion epic, and also it propagates the Buddhist philosophy, particularly Buddhist logic. The Buddhist logic in the Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist logic is a separate part. In the Manimegalai epic, two chapters, particularly chapter 27 and 29. Chapter 27, Samaya Kanakar Thiram Ketakadai. In that chapter, Manimegalai discussed with other religious philosophers. The another chapter, last but one, 29th chapter, Tavattiram Pundu Taramam Ketakadai, Manimegalai learned Dharma from Aravana. The two chapters in Manimegalai are mentioned the Buddhist logic in Tamil terminology. Text Sanskrit are available. We reconstruct that text. Dharmakirti, Nagarjuna, and other Buddhist logic. Manimegalai, the religion of Manimegalai, you know that Buddhism has two sects, Theravada, the Hinayana, and Mahayana. Tamil scholars argued, some Tamil scholars argued, the Manimegalai belongs to Theravada text. And, some scholars like argued that because there is a mention about Tudida Logam and Yenil Buddhas, many Buddhas. So here the 2 points, the Tudidaloka and many Buddhas, the Manimegali text belongs to Mahayana text. But Professor Vanamamalai argued that the Manimegali is, we fixed not Theravada text or Mahayana text. The Manimegali epic is written in the transcendental period, the Theravada to Mahayana. There is a transition period. In that transition period, the Manimegali text was written. He argued like that. So we can the Manimegali epic has some aspects of Mahayana and some aspects of Theravada Bautam and Mahayana. The Manimegali itself, the story itself, Manimegali story, the goddess, sea goddess of Manimegali, is mentioned in Buddha Jataka. So that the Manimegali, the goddess, sea goddess Manimegali, helps the sea travelers during their travels. So the Kovalan, the hero of the Silappatikaram, he was escaped by the help of sea goddess Manimegalai. He named his daughter as Manimegala. The Manimegalai, daughter of Madhavi, became the hero of the Manimegalai. In both the Silappatikaram and Manimegalai, normally the epic in other like Kavya Darsa and other epic, other grammar mentioned that only heroes is the or maybe the hero may be the male, but in the Silappatikaram and Manimegalai, the portrait of female heroism, not male heroism. Female heroism is very much propagated in Manimegalai. The entire epic Manimegalai, the movement of Manimegalai is only mentioned, and the Buddhist philosophy, there is a aspect in Buddhist philosophy, flux. There is no permanency, everything in motion. So the flux aspect of the philosophy of flux is, we can see in the characterization of Manimegalai. Manimegalai transcend the time, transcend the space, and transcend the gender. I have written an article, The Female Heroism in Manimegalai in Tamil. It's not available in English. Though in this article, I argue the characterization of Manimegalai is characterized according to the Buddhist philosophy, flux. There is no permanency. So Manimegalai transcend the time, present, past, and future, and he transcend the place, the earth, and space, and other world also. So he transcend the earth and other worlds also. Further, the gender of Manimegalai is in flux. Sometimes in two places he become male. He become male due to his divine power. He became a male. At the time in the chapter 27, at the time there is no religious convention or religious teaching to the female members. So Manimegalai became a male, and he discussed with the philosophers in that time, particularly Saiva philosophy, Brahmavadam, Vainavavadam, Vedavadam, Asivagavadam, Nigantavadam, alias Jainism, Sangyam, Vaisedikam, and Buddhavada. So the 27th chapter, Sitali Chatanar depicts the other side of the Parabakam of the Buddhism. other philosophers' ideas about the Buddhi, about the logic. Then the chapter 29, he established the Buddhist logic. So that in the Buddhist logic, he denied the logic system of Vedics, Nyayavadis, and other philosophers. He used only two tools, Pratyaksha and Anumana. So logic, the logic system of basic logic system only operates only with these two tools, Pratyaksha and Anumana. Pratyaksha means perception, Anumana means inference. So the 10 tools of Vaidika logic or Nyayavadis logic is comprised in two. That is, one is Pratyaksha and the other is Anumana. He used as a Tamil word also. So the Buddhist philosophy, the terms, the terminologies, the philosophical terms, Chitale Chatanar used in, he created Tamil terms, Pratyaksha, Kandal, Anumana, Kardal. So he make a term in Tamil term. He speak Buddhist philosophy not in Pali or Sanskrit word. He explained in Tamil terms. That is further. The Buddhist logic in the last chapter, he established both the Dharmakirti also mentioned is Nyaya Bindu, only these two tools. Dharmakirti, you know, a very famous Buddhist logician. He also mentioned the logic is only two, that's Pratyaksha and Anumana. So in many also Sitale Chatana and in Anumana, Aravana talk about the three kinds of Anumana, Anumana. But among the three, Karya Anumana is best. But the other Anumana say as skill fast. The many the perception and inference. They explained the explanation of inference. He also explained the logical fallacies, Anumana. So the logic system, basic logic for explain the fallacy. Suppose in Karya Anumana, we can hear a sound of the peacock. Heard a sound of peacock, but we cannot assume where the peacock is there. We cannot. We can assume the peacock, but we cannot. Where is this kind of the peacock simile was used in other logic text, but many and voice may when we had the voice of elephant, we can assume there is an elephant, but we cannot assert where is the elephant. So this kind of fallacy, Anumana Abhasam, he detailedly work out. So I think that the Buddhist logic system Sitale Tschacher adopted is not as in the Pali or Sanskrit text. I think he own. So the Buddhist logic in Manimekalai is not a imitation or influence of Pali and Sanskrit text. He get from the source, maybe from Pali and Sanskrit, but the narrative pattern and the terms and the similes and the argument pattern all are belongs to Tamil epistemology. So Manimehalai is a symbol of Buddhist logic, Tamil Buddhist logic, and it portrayed the Tamil epistemology. So Tamil system of knowledge are in depth in the Manimehalai text. This is my argument. I think I have to complete my speech. I think if any more time I can talk. Otherwise, I conclude my speech. Please bear with my English. I'm not expert in English language, so please bear with my English.
That's not an issue at all. that is actually. Please forgive us for that fact that you even brought it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Next up, we have Dr. Tarsten Tschacher. Over to you, Dr. Tarsten Tschacher.
Yes, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for having me in this fascinating panel today. My apologies at the very beginning for a short moment of a few minutes. My connection had broken down. I hope this doesn't happen now in the during my share of the evening. I shall now try to share a little presentation. Who is the host? Because it says the host has disabled participants screen sharing, and if I could just have the possibility to.
Yeah, we should be having it, and I thought, we'd agreed that the host would enable you. The hosts, can you please enable Siddhika? I
haven't gotten any request to enable.
Yes or no? You have. And so?
Yeah, it's happening. 1 second. You should be able to see soon.
Well, at the moment, we can hear you.
Okay, good. We are finally shifting into the early modern period and look at yet another religious tradition that came into the Tamil country and started enriching Tamil literature from the late 16th century onwards, and that is Islam. I shall just try to give you a very, very brief idea of the Islamic Tamil literature and texts, and then speak in greater detail about the question of poetics and what we need to talk about in particular in this context, the question of translation. So there is a sustained actually engagement with both Arabic poetics and to a admittedly lesser degree Persian poetics in Tamil, found in texts written by Muslims on Islamic themes, which is what I shall be referring to as Islamic Tamil texts. As I mentioned, we have texts starting from the late 16th century. The first Islamic Tamil text that we know about is a poem entitled Ayra Mas'ala, or the 1,000 Questions, which was composed in 1572-73 of the Common Era. And from that time onwards, really, we have a pretty continuous stream of texts about Islamic themes in the Tamil language. I will little bit limit myself here to the time up to the year 1842. That is when the first Islamic Tamil text actually gets printed. But print doesn't really change the story very radically. It, in a sense, continues, or Muslims continue to produce poetry on similar patterns well into the 20th century, definitely up to the First World War, but I will mainly focus on those texts which were produced before 1842. So we have a total corpus there of about 80 to 100 extant texts, ranging in length between about 40 lines. You can see if you have 10 of these Virtam stanzas that Professor Shulman mentioned, then you have 40 lines, to one text that actually has more than 27,000 of these lines. So you can see some of these texts can be pretty long and massive. And we indeed are in the fortunate position to still uncover new texts. So you see the manuscript, which is in private possession in the picture down there. This seems to be a text which we as yet do not know, which hasn't been written about, which hasn't been edited, etc. Finally, one thing I would like to stress about Islamic Tamil literature is that in contrast to what we see most over South Asia when it comes to Islam, the main influence in that Islamic Tamil literature, interestingly enough, has been directly from Arabic and not so much from Persian. This doesn't mean Persian is absent. It just means we actually have far more influence from Arabic than we are usually used to, including the way that Arabic words are written and pronounced in this tradition, which shows some impact of Southern Arabia, of dialects spoken in Yemen and Oman. So, in order to speak about the engagement of these Tamil texts with Arabic and Persian literature and especially the poetics in these languages, I basically have tried to put up 5 theses, and I shall try to explain those theses as we move along. The first thesis is that Tamil poetics, so the rules that we find in these Tamil poetic texts, actually structure the interaction of Tamil and Arabic. The second thesis is that because Tamil has, by that time, by the 16th, 17th century, such a strong tradition of poetics, that it has actually prevented large-scale adaptation of Arabic poetics in the way that we see, for example, in Urdu poetry. My third thesis is that therefore the primary level of engagement between these two languages actually occurred outside what I call here poetically structured texts, in the more, let's say, day-to-day domain of texts. And I will show you what I mean by that. The fourth thesis is that in this context, untranslatability actually is a matter of form and not of meaning. Leave it as that for the moment. I will explain what I mean by that. And finally, that literal translation, that is the kind of word-by-word translation that we are in a sense used to when we speak about translation, is in this system only a form of commentary, whereas full translation, a total translation, actually requires translation not of simply of words, but of poetic form as well. So let me start with the first of these theses, which is the easiest. Tamil poetics structure the interaction of Tamil and Arabic. One thing you see, you don't have to search very much. The moment you look into any Islamic poem in Tamil, you find references to the Tamil poetic tradition and the texts that make up the tradition. And the best place to look is always a section in the poem that is called the Abhayadakam. This is a section at the beginning of a poem where the poet basically tells you what a bad person he is, and especially what a bad poet he is, right? So he tells you, I have actually no clue about literature and I shouldn't be writing this poem, but well, here I am. And in doing so, he shows you actually how much he knows. So this is one fairly standard example dating to 1753, where the poet mentions that what he does not know are all the Karike treatises, the Nigante sort of lexicographical works, and then he mentions some of the most important grammars and poetic works of Tamil, the Tolkappiyam, the Chinnul, and the Nannul. And especially the Nannul, which is a sort of, maybe we can call it an updated Tolkappiyam from the 12th, 13th century, is a particular favorite. It's probably the most mentioned Tamil grammar in these Muslim poems. Now, the very interesting thing is Muslims themselves never actually wrote Tamil grammars or poetic texts prior to the late 19th century. So they basically accepted the tradition with which Tamil poets were working. And this explains something that indeed has made Islamic Tamil literature a little bit odd in the eyes of many, namely what you might call the Tamilness of that literature. So while most of the Islamic literary texts mention that they are based on Arabic or occasionally on Persian sources, they derive their meters, their imagery, and even their genres, I would say, solely from Tamil Poetics. You can explain these texts solely by referring to what is in these Tamil poetic texts. I say this even with regard to genre because the great doyen of the study of Islamic Tamil texts, a man called M.M. Uwais, he came up with the idea that there are actually 5 genres that Muslims adopted into Tamil literature from Arabic and Persian. And I personally don't believe in this theory. So actually, when you look into those texts that supposedly are in these genres, you very often find completely understandable Tamil genre terms, such as Puranam or Amane or something like that, in the text itself. So the text self-identifies as belonging to that genre. So the curious thing of this Islamic Tamil literature is that it looks, in a sense, like any other early modern Tamil poem, with one exception, and that is a fair amount of Arabic and Persian words in the text, which I will come to a little bit later. So the result is that the only things where we can really see a sort of impact, direct impact of poetics, not of content matter, but really of poetics from Arabic or Persian into Tamil, are things which I would call simulated. That is, Tamil Muslim poets use resources that are there in the Tamil tradition to sort of give an impression of the text as being more similar to Arabic or Persian. This you find, for example, in a number of narrative texts that are there that use a particular meter, the so-called kanni, which are couplets rather than these 4-line virutam stanzas. So, of course, Persian and Arabic narration is very often done with through these couplets, and the kanni gives a little bit of an impression of that when you use it. But it's, of course, a meter that is absolutely bona fide, covered by the sort of Tamil poetic authorities. So to a certain degree, you can already almost say that the impact of Arabic on the poetics of a Tamil text is almost in inverse relation to the degree of regulation by those poetics. That is, those texts that are most strongly literary, you might say, are also those texts where you find the least direct, visible impact from Arabic. And this has led to a situation where, well, this kind of literature has been seen as really very strange from the perspective of talking about Islam, because it all looks so very Tamil in its form. Now, as I said, by the way, I don't know, somehow these yellow lines have appeared. I don't know where they came from. As I've said, in order to investigate more closely of how actually these Muslim authors conceptualize their relationship to the Arabic and Persian tradition, I would submit that we actually try to move beyond the more narrowly literary texts and look more closely at what can be called non-literary texts. And for that, we have to look at 2 terms which are there in Tamil, namely Ilakkanam and Ilakkiyam. Ilakkiyam is usually translated as literature and Ilakkanam as grammar, even though Ilakkanam is far more than what we generally tend to call grammar. And of course, these are terms which ultimately derive from Sanskrit. Ilakkiyam is lakshya, that which is defined, and Ilakkanam is lakshana, so that which defines. So in a sense, you can say literature are all those texts which are actually following the rules prescribed in the Ilakkanam sort of texts. That means the moment you go to the Ilakkanam side, the moment you produce texts such as, for example, commentaries, you are a little bit less restrained by all those rules which apply to how to properly compose a text. And therefore, what I want to do here very quickly is to have a look at one such text, namely a local translation from Arabic composed by a man called Mahmoud bin Muhammad Labai, who is actually better known as Mamun Ainar or as Mahmoud Tibi. And it's a text called Idham al-Fawaid, written about in 1730. And what makes this text so interesting is it's a treatise on Islamic doctrine, written in Arabic by this local Tamil author. And then the author himself translates it into Tamil. And not only that, so we don't only have a sort of Tamil author writing in Arabic and then sort of self-translating his work. We also know that this author was part of very important networks for us. On the one side, he was a disciple of a man called Sheikh Sadaqatullah bin Sulaiman al-Kahiri, who was the most important Muslim theologian in the Tamil country in the 17th century. So he's very much part of local religious elite networks. But he was also supposedly involved with the composition of the most important poetic Islamic Tamil work, the Sira Puranam, in 1700, as the legend says, the man who actually supplied the poet with the information of what the Arabic texts say about the life of Muhammad. So this is a very, very interesting sort of text to look at because of the author as well. Now, when we look at this text, the impact of Arabic on it is immediately visible. And it's immediately visible for the simple reason that practically most of the manuscripts and printed versions of this text are in Arabic script. So both the Tamil and the Arabic part are in Arabic script. The oldest of these manuscripts, which intriguingly enough comes from Indonesia, that we know currently, dates to 1778. And you see a picture here. So basically what is in red is the Arabic text, and what is in black then is the Tamil translation of the Arabic text. That the Tamil translation looks often a bit bigger than the Arabic has to do partly with the fact that sometimes there's material added to make the Tamil translation a bit more understandable. But in general, what we can observe when we look at the Tamil translations, we see that Arabic, in contrast to the poetic literary text, Arabic very much impacts every level of the translation. It impacts the syntax, for example. It impacts what case endings it uses, because the Arabic text has a particular preposition, let's say the preposition li or the preposition be. And in every case, the translator will use a particular Tamil case, the dative for li, the instrumental case for be, etc., to render that Arabic preposition, which sometimes leads to strange sounding sentences. There's also a very deliberate effort to render really every element in the Arabic sentence, whether you would have it in a normal Tamil sentence or not. And finally, the language of that Tamil translation is very decidedly non-poetic. And you see this nowhere better than in one case, where in effect the text quotes an Arabic poem, and not just any Arabic poem, but a poem from a very famous book, the Fusus al-Hikam by Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi, which he quotes exactly as it is in the Arabic text. So I've given you here the translation of that little section on the left side, which is in a sense the translation of the Arabic part of the text. And then the moment you look into the Tamil text, you realize this is a translation, but it's a translation that is absolutely non-poetic. So he has made no effort to turn this Arabic poem into a Tamil poem. And on top of that, especially in the first sentence, he has basically left all the Arabic nouns in place. This is a little bit what you call, in the Vaishnava tradition, you call it Manipravalam, where the Sanskrit words are left in place and you just put Tamil endings. So I've left all those Arabic words if you just read the first sentence. If you say Tanzih without Tashbih, you become someone who has thereby placed Allah Ta'ala in a state by the surah of Tanzih. If you don't know Arabic, this is not understandable to you. However, in the case of this text, it was probably understandable because in the discussion before that, and now they have started drilling, fantastic. In the discussion before that, you have an explanation of all these terms. But still, you can see no effort was taken to translate this into a poetic form. At the same time, the interesting thing is, and I've already mentioned that there seems to be no problem, however, to translate Arabic words. Every single Arabic words can be found translated somewhere in the text. right? And this is something that you find also in the poetry. And to jump back into the poetic side of things, you have this curious situation that the poets use Arabic words quite freely in the Tamil text, but they as freely use Tamil translations of these Arabic words. So it's not as if they use the Arabic words because they don't know how to say it in Tamil. And it's not as if they use the Tamil words because they think their audience doesn't understand Arabic. They simply use whatever fits best aesthetically at a point. So to give you an example of this is a short section from the Sira Puranam, a very famous scene where in the first stanza, God has just created Adam, the first human being, and orders the angels to bow down in front of Adam. In the second stanza, we are told the angels obey God and they prostrate themselves before Adam. And the third stanza is the important moment when one of the angels, namely Satan, refuses to bow and thereby refuses God's orders. Now, the interesting thing in these three stanzas is each stanza talks about the angels, but it does so with a different word. So in the first stanza, it uses the word Amara, which comes from Sanskrit. I've translated it here as the deathless ones. In the second stanza, it uses the Arabic word Malak to translate angel or to refer to the angels. And in the third stanza, it uses the word Vanavar, which comes from the Tamil word Vanam, heavens or the skies, so the celestials. So a Sanskrit derived word, an Arabic derived word, a Tamil derived word, you might say, or Dravidian word, are all put together referring to the same thing. And not only that, the Sanskrit and Tamil words that are used here in a Hindu poem would actually refer to the Devas. So, and you can find a couple of Muslim poems where actual names of Hindu gods, most importantly of Yama, the god of death, are applied to the angel of death. So the angel of death is actually called Yama in these poems. There's a sort of equivalency made between the Devas in Hindu tradition and the angels in the Muslim tradition. And this is something which I call the Nigantu principle. The Nigantus are texts in the Tamil grammatical traditions which work a little bit like a thesaurus. So you have lists of words that supposedly mean the same things. And the Arabic words, in a sense, get fitted into these Niganta lists. That is, Arabic words in this Islamic tradition have fixed translations. No matter into which text you look, what century, what author, it doesn't matter. You can be pretty sure they use the same translations for Arabic words that the others use, which sometimes you may have a stanza in front of you which looks 100% Tamil Sanskrit, not a single Arabic word in sight. But if you know the translations, which words are used as translations of which Arabic words, you can very easily sort of go back to the Arabic argument behind it. And these are found both in the literary as well as in these non-literary texts like the one that I showed you by Mamunainar. So effectively, these Arabic terms were entered into this system of existing equivalences or synonyms. So, which is why I would say it may be even difficult to speak about translation here, because basically what you have are synonyms rather than translations. And I would even argue that by this, the Arabic words in Tamil poems actually become Tamil words. And I can make that argument, interestingly enough, from the Tamil grammars. The Tamil grammars, Nannul, for example, basically permits the use of Arabic words in Tamil by including Arabic and a lot of other languages under the term Tschacher, which originally was something like a dialect word. And he basically includes all sorts of loanwords under this rubric of Tschacher. Now, there's another rubric of words in Tamil, which is called Vadachol. Vadachol is basically Sanskrit, you might say. Literally, it means a northern word. And this category is already there in Tolkapiam. And when you look at one of the earliest or the earliest commentary on Tolkapiam, the author of that commentary, Ilam Puranar, explains with regard to that term, Vadachol. He says, Vadachol yanum, Vadachol vokum Tamilchol. So you might say, in a context of a Tamil poem, a Sanskrit word is not a Sanskrit word. It's a Tamil word that looks like a Sanskrit word. And I would say something very similar happens to the Arabic words the moment they come into a Tamil poem, which is why this part of the Arabic tradition is so easily borrowed into Tamil, into these Tamil poems, where the other things are somehow absent. The result of this is that there's basically no statement that is untranslatable. So if you just take the Shahada, the confession of faith, sometimes you have this fully in Arabic. You will have the full statement, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, in a Tamil poem. And sometimes you will find something like this, Allah Urban Yendrum, Tundru Muhammad Abantudur Yendrum, which is more or less a translation of exactly that very same statement. And there is, at a certain level, when it comes to meanings of words, to Porul, you might say, there is nothing that cannot be translated, right? What is really difficult to translate, however, is, you might say, the poetic part, or rather, we can put it the other way around. The fact that we see so little effect of Arabic poetics on the Tamil Islamic poems is simply because not only are the words translated and the grammar and syntax translated, but even the poetics are translated. So the fact of carrying over this poem into Tamil would necessitate a poet to use Tamil poetics rather than Arabic poetics in order for it to become something you might call a complete translation. Thereby, I would say, sorry, I've in a sense jumped this. So this is actually also exemplified by the fact that these literal translations that I've showed you earlier are in fact called wurei in the text. And wurei means commentary. And the interesting thing is that it even goes so far when we have a text that is translated from Arabic into Tamil. Again and again, we find the Arabic root tarjama, mutarjumatan, or whatever. So which is usually translated as a translation, that is translated into Tamil as wurei. So the conceptualization of these literal translations is their commentaries, but as commentaries, they are deficient because commentaries are non-literary, you might say. They're not ilakyam, right? So in order to make a complete translation, you really have to, so to say, render the poetics as well. And thereby, and that is sort of my conclusion, thereby Tamil and Arabic are rendered as equivalent systems of expression, equivalent in the sense that they can be compared, right? So this is, for example, a verse where the author very deliberately compares Tamil linguistic disciplines, you might say, sol, morphology, yirte, phonetics, and ilakkanam, grammar, with Arabic terms. So he speaks about Nahu, which is the Arabic word for grammar. He speaks about sarf, which is the Arabic word for morphology. Due to the rhyme, he couldn't use the word for phonology. But in any case, you can see how these two languages, in a sense, are made up of similar sort of structures. But you can't easily, in a sense, transfer one structure into the other. You have to follow, whenever you write, say, in Arabic, you would have to follow the Arabic rules. And we have poets who actually wrote Arabic poetry and Tamil poetry. And it's fascinating to see how different their poems are, because when you look at the Arabic poems, they are perfectly recognizable Arabic panegyrics. And then you look into the Tamil poetry and you find very, very curious phrases where people earlier used to say, maybe that person was not learned enough, etc., didn't know enough about Islam. That's why they used all those Hindu terms. But once you look at these kind of translations that exist between at the level of words, and you realize how much of this actually draws back on Arabic texts, but then translates this into a fully, into a sort of text that is fully in line with Tamil poetic conventions. So this would be sort of my conclusion. My last comment on this, there is one extremely fascinating text that is a very modern one. It was published, I think, in 2000 or so, but it's something worth looking at. It's a text, it's basically a translation of the Quran into Tamil Venba verses. And it's fantastic. I mean, it's very close to the Arabic text and yet actually is in its poetics fully Tamil. I think it comes so close in a sense with this rendering into poetic Tamil that the author himself got afraid. He actually in the preface says this is not a translation. It's a sort of attempt to render the thoughts of the Quran in Tamil poetry. But when you look at it bit by bit, you see how every element in the Arabic text is actually represented somewhere in the Tamil text. So that's in a sense a stroke of genius, which you don't find as readily in the earlier texts. But in a sense, this is what I would say. You have a group of people who are absolutely aware of the Arabic texts, of their sort of the way they express ideas. And these ideas are then transformed into a poem that works by the rules of Tamil Poetics, is acceptable to anyone who knows those rules, but at the very same time tries to stay as true as possible to the Arabic or Persian source. So thank you very much. I think I've gone a bit over time, but I hope we still have time for the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Shaha. Now I would like to call upon Sadika to end the session for today. Participants are requested to stay till the end, as she will also have some important announcements to make. Over to you, Sadika.
I'd like to butt in. I'm sorry.
Question answers?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have time for questions. We have at least 20 minutes. Yeah. Is Professor Sampson still with us? Okay. Yeah, but then do we have questions or anything that, I mean, okay, while we wait, I'd just like to say just a couple of things which came to mind while I was listening. One thing is, as Professor Shulman pointed out, you know, the influence of Jaina thought on Tamil literature. And when Professor Anand Kumar was speaking about that one particular chapter in Manimekhalai, where there is a discussion about the different sort of streams of philosophy, and ultimately the hero decides on her course of action. So there is like, I understand that Manimekhalai is called a Vad Kavya, that there is a discussion as in, you know, Vad and Vivad. And I mean, while he was talking about it, I was reminded of a similar kind of, you know, like what Professor Shulman pointed out as the Jain influence, not in, I mean, in thought, in sort of a view of life, rather than in specifically the content or perhaps even the imagery, which looks quite different actually from, you know, the whole idea of ahimsa. And here you have these military metaphors which, you know, sort of describe love. So in a similar fashion, you know, I was reminded of the Samanya Phala Sutta.
नहीं तो अगर इस तरीके की बात है तो
Sorry, I just lost my connection for a moment. So I mean that's all I'm saying. Given the fact that it's a Buddhist text, it seems that, I mean, even in Manimekhalai, that sort of one scene of discussing different philosophies and coming to the conclusion that, you know, Buddhism is the best
Akshita's connection is lost, so probably we'll wait for her for a minute or so. Any other questions or comments for the two speakers? Are there any questions on the chat box that you see?
Yes, there is a question from Maliha.
Okay.
I will just read out the question. I have a question. Given that Arab migrants did come around 8th century to South India, and there is some evidence of Arabi scripts developing them, what do you think would be the impact of that history on the Islamic literature in Tamil from the 18th century that we are looking at now?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We don't quite know when we first have Middle Eastern traders who were Muslims on the Tamil coast, right? The 8th century, very early evidence, we have fairly good evidence for Kerala, for Tamil Nadu, then also for Sri Lanka, but for Tamil Nadu, it's a bit later. My feeling about this is, and this is really only something that I can currently speculate about, is that the development of Tamil poetry by local Muslims in effect starts at a time when the connections to the Middle East have become a bit weaker, partly due to the impact of the Portuguese, but also partly due to the fact that the Tamil Muslim merchants themselves looked east towards Southeast Asia more than westwards. And that in that particular context, where you were very much integrated into local states, etc., you finally come to a situation where people decided to support Tamil poetry. This is a very complex argument, and I've sort of pushed it into a very short sentence here to not to take too much time. But the curious thing for me really seems to be that the turn towards Tamil poetry happens at a time when many of these Arab settlers were far more localized, had intermarried, etc., than at a time when there was a lot of interchange, that people constantly came and went between the coasts. I don't know whether that answers your questions. With regard to the script, the adaptation of the Arabic script for Tamil, again, we don't know really when that happened. I mean, we have a couple of texts, manuscripts, inscriptions from the 18th century. If you go before that, it becomes all very problematic. There have been a lot of claims about such things. That there are very much earlier, there's very much earlier evidence, but when you follow up on it, you see that the evidence is weak. We don't really know much about it.
There's another question from Janvi to Dr. Shah. Janvi, yeah. So she says your presentation was fascinating. And she asks, have there been conjectures or theories as to why the Islamic and Tamilian systems could not blend the way probably like Buddhism and Jainism did with Tamil? Is there something intrinsic to the two structures that disallows the blending, or was it a conscious effort to keep them distinct?
I would say to a certain degree both. So what I'm definitely not wanting to be heard is as arguing the idea of Tamil's blended isolation, as David has so nicely put it. I'm definitely not wanting to do that. In fact, what I find fascinating is exactly how did this interaction happen. And I think the reason was plain and simple that, to sort of fuse, for example, Arabic meter with Tamil meter becomes a difficult issue. So you either decide you follow Arabic metric rules or you follow Tamil metric rules, right? And in that context, people decided to follow Tamil metric rules. and they decided to follow the text that existed. And there's a very curious thing that the more, I would put this as a rule, the more grammaticalized, in Sheldon Pollock's terms, a language is, that is, the stronger the existing grammatical and poetic tradition is before, in this case, Muslims come onto the scene, the less will be the impact of Arabic poetics on the writings in that language. And interestingly enough, all the examples that we have not really been considered very much by Islamic studies, precisely because they look too foreign from the perspective of Arabic. One example of this is Javanese, where you had a very strong tradition of poetry long before Java became Islamic, which was continued, which was also cherished. Even the pre-Islamic texts were cherished. Another example is China. You have, interestingly enough, a very rich Chinese Islamic literature, and yet they follow very strongly Chinese rules of how to write a poem, etc. And the third example for me would be Tamil. Whereas in those examples where a large-scale takeover has taken place from Arabic or Persian or both, you usually have cases where there is no strong tradition of this grammar before. So I don't think that one couldn't have fused it if one would have wanted to, but I think most people didn't see a reason why to do it, because not to do it wasn't perceived as being parochial or anything like that, which is what we might misinterpret it as. It was simply seen as, okay, this is how it works, right? Much as you don't suddenly mix the grammatical endings of another language into your English. Well, some people do, I know, but in a similar manner, you wrote a Tamil poem, you followed the rules of Tamil to compose a Tamil poem. You wrote an Arabic poem, you followed those rules, right? These were simply two different rule books. They were both good, they were both fine. It was good to know them both, but you wouldn't take over easily one thing from the other side. And I think this is roughly what has happened here.
We have two more questions in the chat. Sorry.
In the chat box, I think, Niranjana, if you could read them out.
Yes, ma'am. So in extension to the previous question, Maliha continues to ask, how different is Muslim Tamil literature of Sri Lanka different from literature in Tamil Nadu, given that the historical trajectories of the two communities are also quite different? Two Muslim communities, sorry, are also quite different.
Should I answer immediately? I'll make that very short. They are not different at all. But one thing which is very interesting is the vast majority of the Islamic Tamil literature was actually written in what we call the Pandya country. So the southern part of Tamil Nadu. We have texts from the Kaveri Delta, we have texts from Sri Lanka, but there is a very peculiar geographic patterning. And the Pandya country, Madurai, and the coastal regions of southern Tamil Nadu are really the prime centers for this Islamic literature. But the literature written in Sri Lanka is exactly the same. And this historic difference between the two groups that you talk about, actually they aren't that different historically. They interpret their history very differently. And that different interpretation is a result of the colonial period. In Sri Lanka, Muslims, in order to find a separate representation, had to argue very forcefully that they are not Tamils. Because until 1870s, they were represented by the Tamil representative. They didn't want that, so they started arguing, we're actually not Tamils, we have nothing to do with them. But the history is actually more or less the same. So this is more a result of colonialism than anything else.
There are a couple more questions, I think.
Right. Nahid asks if there are any texts translated in Arabic and Persian from Tamil.
Nowadays there are, but I'm not aware of anything until at least the 19th century.
I had a question to Professor Shulman. So when you were saying that, when you were talking about rasa, when you were talking about Sanskrit poetics, you called it a universalized abstract emotion. That's how I mean, if I heard it right. How would you say that's different from the way, the signifiers in the Tinai work, for example, in Agam poetry? How would you say they're different?
Actually, the kind of emotional experience that one has from reading a classical Tamil poem is extremely different from at least the theoretical notion of what rasa or rasa-based poetics would be like. The Tamil Sangam poems give us an emotion which is entirely concretized, tangible, located in the human body, organically related to the physical world outside. That's very, very different from experiencing, let's say, Sringara Rasa, in which you have a kind of idealized, abstracted notion of what love might be like. In fact, I mean, there's really almost no way to connect the two. That may be one reason that the Kashmiri Rasa poetics never really quite took on in the Tamil case, because the Tamil tradition from the very beginning was very profoundly located in the realia of life, the physical setting, the emotional world of the human being, and they have a notion actually of being a complete human being, meaning experiencing all the things that human beings actually do in their bodies, not in some mentalistic or abstracted mode. So I think it's really very, very, very distinct. I wanted to say something in response to Torsten's beautiful talk. One of the things that comes through from what you've said, and I think it's worth emphasizing in the context of this evening's discussions, is how easily Tamil is able to expand to incorporate these other words, lexemes. I mean, often it's more than that. They flow into Tamil just exactly as you said. These Arabic words become Tamil words. If you're a Tamil Muslim, it's a kind of Tamil. In that sense, it's not so different from the way, let us say, English assimilated the Latin roots of Norman French. Can anybody imagine English today without those French roots? We would not be able to say a single sentence. Something like that is possible to Tamil. That's a mark of a language which has a capacity for that expansive expressive ability. It's a very powerful thing. But on the question of the actual translations, or Urai, the model seems to be very close to the Tibetan Buddhist one, translating from Sanskrit into Tibetan. They produced a kind of one-to-one correspondence in a rather mechanical way, so close that one can actually reconstruct the Sanskrit original if you have only the Tibetan.
Yeah, that's very much the case. That's
one last question actually there. Can you see it in your chat box? It's
yes, I saw it indeed. So, okay, good. Then let me immediately move to this. Yes, indeed. I mean, the example you give, for example, saying Niranjan when referring to Allah in Bengali poetry, I suspect you refer to. You have exactly the same kind of things in Tamil. That means it's not necessarily the same words used, but for example, in the one verse I gave from the Sira Puranam, God is referred to as Vadivilan. So the one who doesn't have a Vadivel, the one who's formless. And you have a lot of these things. And you find indeed even Sanskrit terms in effect, actually, because this is early modern Tamil poetry. This is a time which is full of Sanskritisms. Actually, it's quite interesting. I've once written about this. In the 19th century, you had a lot of these theological treatises, what we call Arabic Tamil, also usually published in Arabic script. And some of them have been republished nowadays in Tamil script. And the argument is always made, they are so full of Arabic, you don't understand the Arabic, we have to translate them a little bit. When we put them into Tamil script, we also make them more Tamil by taking out the Arabic. But when you actually compare what they do, in most cases, it's not the Arabic words that are cleaned up. It's the Sanskrit words that are cleaned up. So when the Sanskrit text, the original text speaks about South India, Sri Lanka as Yideshangalil, in these countries. And then you look into the Tamil script edition and it says Nam Natil, in our country, singular, and Dravidian word, right? So yes, this is very similar. With regard to the question of whether there is a distinction between Arabic and Persian in the degree of adaptability, I'm not sure whether we can, but there is one curious thing. I think I mentioned those texts which are in these Kani couplets, which are narratives, where I said this is a little bit simulating the feel you get from say, a kissa or a hikayat. And I do have the feeling that they come up in a context where there's a stronger Persian influence. They come up clearly in Madurai at a particular point in time when there is an impact from the Deccan. And they also seem to be based more strongly on a tradition of texts, of narratives, popular kind of epics that you also find in Dakni and in Persian. So there's still certainly a lot more to do there. But there may be something there. You might, this is a very interesting question that you have posed. Thank you.
Ma'am, there's just one last question that was sent to me on chat.
Okay, go ahead.
So
would that be the last one, huh?
Right. This is again to Dr. Shah. At the end of your interesting talk, you mentioned a work written in the year 2000 based along the understanding of the Quran. Can you please mention the author or the publication house?
Give me a second, I will take it out. I have it here. So this is a text written by a person called Vepa Babul. So P-Pa-Pul, written like this. It's called Tirumarayan Ten Malarkar. So honey blossoms from the Holy Scripture. And it was first published actually later than I thought. It was published first in 2007. The author died, and this is published sort of posthumously. So Vepa Babul, and I think the son is the copyright holder, Akbar Basha Kadiri. Tirumarayan Ten Malarkar, published by Sandhya Natarajan in Chennai. If you write me an email, I can give you the exact references to this book.
Right, on that note of connection, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much. Siddhika.
Yes, so I'd like to begin by thanking the university and our Vice Chancellor for allowing us to organize this event, the Dean for all his support and encouragement, and our resource persons for the day, Professor Shulman, Dr. Ananda Kumar, and Dr. Tarsten Tschacher, for accepting our invitation and sharing their time and knowledge with us. I would like to express my gratitude to the faculty of the Comparative Literature Department for giving us this opportunity. Oh God. Oh, yeah. For giving us this opportunity and for the constant support. I'd also like to thank the Dean of Academics, Professor Meera Srinivas and Dr. Atreyi Sharma for their help. A special thanks to Mr. Chitesh Pandey from Learningo for helping us set up the online sessions and making the required adjustments to accommodate all those who registered. My vote of thanks would be incomplete without mentioning the team of students who helped pull off today's event successfully. Thank you, you did great. I would like to conclude by thanking all those who attended the workshop. I hope you had a good time with us. Due apologies for the flood of emails from our end. We'll be sending another one tonight with a link for tomorrow's session, and a link for certificates will be shared at the end of the day tomorrow. Have a nice evening. See you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We would like to see all of you tomorrow. We will definitely see Professor Shulman, but Dr. Tschacher, if you're free at 4:30, most welcome. Dr. Ananda Kumar and Professor Samson. So we hope to see you again tomorrow. And we hope to continue to see you. We'll make plans for that tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.